Montana Territory, June 1883. The wind kicked up dust along the main street of Benton Ridge as the stagecoach rolled in, wheels creaking, horses foaming at the bit. Folks barely took notice until a tall woman stepped down, gripping the tiny hand of a girl on one side and steadying a sleepy boy on the other. Brielle Rawley didn't look like a stranger to hardship. Her dress was plain, dust streaked from travel, and her boots had seen better years. But her spine stayed straight and her jaw set firm. The two children beside her were thin, quiet, clinging to her like roots to dry earth. She paused on the boardwalk, eyes scanning the town. A faded sign swung overhead, Gibbs General Mercantile. She led the children that way. Inside, the scent of flour and old wood filled the air. The storekeeper, a wiry man with a sour mouth, barely looked up. "You lost." "No," Brielle said. "Just new." The girl beside her tugged at her skirt. "I'm thirsty." Brielle knelt. "We'll get water soon, Kelsey." The boy was younger, maybe 4. He leaned against her, silent. The storekeeper's eyes narrowed. "They yours." "They are now," she said simply. "Their folks were killed in a barn fire outside of Cheyenne. No other kin. I took them in." He blinked. "You their teacher or no, I was their neighbor," she said. "Now I'm just trying to start over with them somewhere decent." From the far corner, a man's voice cut through the quiet. "You will not find decent here, ma'am, but you might find honest." She turned. A cowboy stood near the shelves of dried beans, one hand resting loose at his side. He was broad-shouldered, sun-browned, maybe 30. Worn boots, rolled-up sleeves, a revolver holstered at his hip. But his eyes, their amber color, caught the light like warm glass, watched her with something steadier than curiosity. "I am not looking for perfect," Brielle said. "Just a place we can sleep without fear." He walked forward, nodding at the kids. "They yours by choice, then?" "Yes," Brielle said, standing. "I am not here for pity, just work if there is any." He looked at her a long second. "Name's Silas Carter. I run cattle west of here. Got a bunkhouse, a cook who minds his own business, and more fence to mend than I can manage." She didn't answer right away. "You would hire a woman." "I would hire someone who shows up," he said. "And you did." Kelsey peeked around Brielle's skirts. "Do you have horses?" Silas crouched, not too close. "I do. One named Clementine thinks she is a queen." Kelsey grinned. The boy stared, wide-eyed. "His name's Kit," Brielle said softly. Silas nodded. "You all eaten?" "No." "Come on, then." His wagon smelled of leather and sun. Brielle sat between the children, her hand resting over Kit's as he nodded off again. Silas drove, quiet but not unfriendly. The road was rough, but the sky stretched wide and blue above them. "You from around here?" he asked. "No, born in Missouri. Widow now. My husband died 2 winters ago." She looked out at the rolling hills. "I stayed on where I could, then the fire came. After that, I could not stay." Silas glanced at her. "You pull them out yourself," she nodded. "They were coughing when I found them. We slept in the barn next door for 2 nights. Then we walked." He did not say anything for a while. Then, "That is a hell of a thing." "I could not leave them," she said. "No," Silas said. "I do not imagine you could." His ranch sat in a wide basin of land rimmed with pine, a low house with a tin roof, a barn, several outbuildings. A stream cut through the back pasture. Fences stretched out in every direction. He handed her down from the wagon. "You can stay in the bunkhouse. I will move the men to the hayloft for now. They will not mind. I can pay you back once I start." He nodded. "You will?" Later, after stew and bread and 2 baths with boiled water, the children lay curled up on bedrolls under a quilt someone had left behind. Brielle stood outside the bunkhouse, arms crossed, watching the moon rise. Silas approached, quiet. "They all right. They are sleeping for now." He studied her in the pale light. "You are not what I expected today. I get that a lot." He leaned against the porch rail. "You got grit. Not just anyone does what you did." "That was not grit," she said. "That was just doing what had to be done. Same thing, far as I see it." The night stretched between them, quiet but not cold. "You really plan to raise them alone?" he asked. "I plan to," she said. "But plans change." Silas looked at her, and something shifted in his voice, lower now, steadier. "Then we will raise them together." She turned toward him, startled. He did not smile, but his eyes were warm. "I do not say things I do not mean." Brielle looked back toward the door where the children slept inside. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Because I have spent too long out here with nothing but dust between me and the world, Silas said softly. Because you showed up with 2 tired kids and a heart big enough to carry them, and because I do not want to see you walk away. She took a breath. The stars above them did not flicker, they blazed. I do not know what to say, she whispered. You do not have to say anything yet, Silas said. Just stay. She looked at him a long time, then she nodded once. All right, he tipped his hat. Tomorrow I will show you the fence line, and he turned to go, leaving her standing under the moonlight with something warm blooming in her chest she had not felt in years. Hope. The sun had barely crested the distant ridge when Brielle stepped outside. Her sleeves rolled past her elbows, and her hair pinned up in a tight knot that had already begun to loosen in the breeze. The grass surrounding the bunkhouse bent gently in the morning wind, heavy with dew. Kit and Kelsey still slept soundly inside, bundled beneath the quilt, their breathing even. Silas was already saddled up, leading a second horse by the reins. He didn't wave or call out, just waited with a quiet patience that felt more respectful than distant. You ever ride before? He asked when she reached the post where he stood. Not since before Missouri turned cold, she said, eyeing the horse, but I remember how. He offered her the reins. This one's named Molly. She's steady, listens close. You don't have to muscle her. Brielle mounted with a practiced swing of her legs, stiff in the joints but sure. You sure you're not a rancher hiding out in a dress? Silas said, easing into his saddle. Maybe I'm just stubborn, she said, nudging Molly forward. They rode in silence for a while, following the fence line that stretched into the hills. The wood posts leaned in places, wire sagging where winter storms had pulled it loose. Birds scattered from the brush as they passed, startled by hoofbeats. I'll need to come back with tools, Silas said. But I wanted you to see the land first, get the shape of it. She scanned the horizon. It's wide, she murmured, feels like it could hold 1,000 secrets. He glanced over. It's held plenty already. When they reached a narrow ravine where the fence had been trampled flat by elk, they dismounted. Silas crouched low, examining the tracks. Brielle stood nearby, arms crossed. You ever think about leaving? She asked suddenly. Montana, I mean, he rose slowly. I did. Once? What stopped you? My brother went east, I stayed. Someone had to keep the land from going to rot. She studied him. You speak about it like it's a person. It's the only thing that ever stayed when the rest of it didn't. They walked the horses along the broken stretch. I could help mend this, she said. You've got extra barbed wire in the shed. I'll show you where. He hesitated, then added, You don't have to prove anything, Brielle. She looked ahead, jaw set. I'm not trying to, I just want to be useful. He didn't argue. By the time they returned, the sun was high and the children were outside. Kelsey crouched over a patch of wildflowers, Kit standing solemnly with a wooden spoon in his hand. One of the ranch hands, a quiet man with a thick beard and a crooked nose, stood nearby, watching over them. He said his name's Amos, Brielle said quietly to Silas. Served with him in the war, Silas replied. He don't talk much, but he's good with kids. She nodded, relieved. Thank you. They dismounted and led the horses toward the barn. Silas paused at the door. You've got a good eye, he said. Most folks come here looking for something. You came ready to give. I lost enough, she said. Giving makes more sense than waiting for more to be taken. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay and old wood. A swallow's nest hung near the rafters, the faint sound of chirping above them. Silas leaned against the stall door. You got plans for those too? Only one, she said. To raise them into people who aren't afraid of the dark. He nodded slowly. That's a good plan. Just then, Kelsey's voice rang out from outside. Miss Brielle. Kit found a turtle. Brielle stepped into the sunlight, her face softening. I'll be right there, she turned back to Silas. I should go see. He didn't try to stop her. I'll get the wire ready. We'll fix that stretch tomorrow. As she walked away, her skirt catching in the grass, Silas watched her go with something quiet in his chest, not longing, not yet, but something rooted and real, like the first sign of spring after a long, hard snow. By late July, the land had dried into ochre and gold, and the workdays stretched long beneath a sky that rarely lent shade. Brielle carried her share without needing to be asked, hauling wire, nursing bruised hands, lifting posts with a quiet strength that made the ranch hands take to her with a respectful nod rather than words. Most evenings, after the children were settled, she lingered on the porch with Silas. He carved wood small animals or fence pegs, depending on his mood, and she mended clothes or shelled peas. The rhythm between them easy, silent mostly, but never strained. One evening, after the heat had softened and the frogs began their low chorus near the creek, Silas spoke without looking up from the block of cottonwood in his hands. "You ever think about teaching Kelsey her letters?" Brielle glanced at the lantern between them. She only just started to hold still long enough to listen. "She's curious, though. I seen her watching the men tally cattle in Amos's ledger." Brielle set her sewing down. "I taught a boy once, back in Missouri before we lost the cornfield. He was slow with numbers, but he could spell anything if you said it twice." Silas tested a groove in the wood with his thumb. "You miss that life?" "I miss knowing what the next day might look like," she said. "But I don't miss the quiet that came after he passed." Nights stretched too long. Silas nodded once. "I had a dog once that used to bark just to hear himself. After he died, the silence stuck around like fog. Never thought I'd miss that old noise." Brielle smiled faintly, then picked up her needle again. "I could start with Kelsey tomorrow. Show her how to shape her name. You could use the back room in the old tack shed," he said. "It's cooler there, gets the morning light." She met his eyes. "You've been thinking on this." "I think about what they need," he said. "And what you might want, even if you don't say it." She folded the fabric neatly in her lap. "No one's done that for me in a long while." He didn't answer, just leaned back against the post, carving slowly. The next morning, she cleared space in the tack shed. Dust danced in the sunlight slanting through the boards, and the scent of linseed and worn leather clung to the walls. She set up crates for seats and used an old saddle blanket for a rug. Kelsey took to it eagerly, tracing letters in the dust and sounding out syllables with bright concentration. Kit watched from the doorway, chewing on a strip of jerky and rolling a smooth stone between his fingers. Later that week, Brielle found a stack of worn readers on the bunkhouse table, set aside beneath a clean rag. She didn't ask, and Silas didn't mention them, but she noticed the torn pages had been carefully mended with glue and a steady hand. One evening, after supper, Kelsey climbed into Silas's lap without invitation and pointed to one of the carved horses on the porch rail. "Did you make that one?" Silas adjusted so she sat steady. "I did. It looks like Clementine. She was the model." Kelsey tilted her head. "Can I have it?" Silas looked over at Brielle. She raised an eyebrow. "That's your decision." He handed the carving gently to Kelsey. "Only if you promise to keep her safe." "I will," she said, cradling it like it might break. Brielle watched the scene unfold, something tugging low in her chest, deep and unfamiliar. Silas didn't look at her, but his hand remained on Kelsey's back until the girl slid to the floor and skipped inside. "I never meant to ask you for anything," Brielle said once they were alone again. "You haven't," he said. "You just showed up with the kind of weight most men wouldn't carry alone." She folded her arms across her waist. "I didn't think anyone would want to carry it with me. I'm not anyone." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "Why are you doing this, Silas?" He looked at her, steady and sure. "Because you make this place feel like more than work, and because when I see you sit with them, I think maybe there's a kind of life out here that's worth building." The wind shifted through the cottonwoods and the porch boards creaked beneath their feet. "I don't need rescuing," she said. "I know, that's why I believe in you." They stood like that for a long moment, lit by the golden hush of dusk. Then she turned toward the door. "I'll bring you coffee in the morning," she said. "I'll be waiting." Inside, Kelsey slept with the small horse tucked in her arms. Kit had curled beside her, one hand still holding the smooth stone. Brielle pulled the quilt higher over their shoulders, pausing at the threshold before she stepped back outside. Silas hadn't moved. She sat beside him once more and picked up her sewing. Neither of them spoke, but the air between them had changed, heavier with intention, lighter with comfort. The stars came out slow, and neither of them moved to go in. By mid-August, thunderheads began to gather most afternoons, and the scent of rain hung thick in the air before it ever fell. The creek behind the house swelled just enough to stir the frogs into louder chorus, and the grass, brittle weeks before, softened underfoot. Brielle spent her mornings in the tack shed with Kelsey, teaching her to sound out sentences about riverboats and prairie dogs. Kit usually sat nearby, stacking smooth pebbles against the wall or tracing shapes into the dirt with a twig. In the afternoons, she helped Silas mend a stretch of fence that ran along a low ridge at the edge of the southern pasture. The wire there had curled loose where elk rubbed against it, and the posts leaned askew. One afternoon, while the children napped under Amos's watch, Brielle steadied a post as Silas drove it deeper into the earth with a maul. Sweat soaked the back of his shirt, and dust clung to his jaw. When he paused to wipe his brow, she passed him the canteen without a word. "You ever think about building something permanent here?" he asked, draping his arm across the top rail. She looked down the slope where the land fell away into a basin of yellow grass. "I used to think permanence was something you found, not something you made." He took a slow drink, then capped the canteen. "I'd like to build a new house, closer to the stream where the pines start, 2 rooms and a porch that faces west." She turned to him fully. "That sounds like a man who already knows where the chimney will go." "I do," he said. "I've been thinking about it since winter, just didn't have a reason to start." Her fingers curled around the rail. "And now, I've got 4 reasons," he said. Her eyes didn't leave his. "You count me among them," he nodded once, "if you'll let me." They didn't speak again until the last post was set, and the wire hummed tight along the stretch. When they walked back, the clouds overhead had thickened into a low ceiling, and the air smelled of copper and earth. Kit and Kelsey waited under the awning by the bunkhouse, Amos sitting nearby with a knife and a block of wood in his hand, though it looked untouched. Kelsey ran up first. "We heard thunder." "It's coming," Brielle said, brushing dust from the girl's dress. "We'll be inside before it hits." Kit reached for Silas's hand, gripping 2 fingers. Silas didn't flinch or pull away. He just looked down and gave a small nod. That evening, rain fell in slow sheets, steady and soft. The children curled together on a bedroll near the hearth, their faces slack with sleep. Brielle stood at the window, watching the drops streak the pane. Silas leaned against the doorframe. "You ever miss the sound of train whistles?" She didn't turn. "Sometimes. Mostly when I forget what they meant. Leaving, ending. I never rode one," he said. "Closest I got was watching them pass through Helena. I was on one the day I married," she said. "My dress was too thin for December and the porter gave me a blanket. I kept it." He stepped closer. "Do you still have it?" "I gave it to Kit. He drags it around like it's stitched with gold." He reached for the oil lamp, dimming the flame until the glow barely touched the floorboards. "You told me once you weren't looking for pity. I'm not." "I know," he said. "That's why I want you here." She turned finally, folding her arms. "You keep saying that, but what if I don't know what to do with it?" "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to stay." She stepped toward him, the hem of her skirt brushing his boot. "I can't make you promises I don't believe in yet." "I'm not asking for promises," he said. "Just time. We'll build it slow, like everything else worth keeping." She looked up at him, her voice low. "And if I want to help raise the roof on that house you mentioned, then we'll start with the foundation," he said. "Together." She didn't answer right away, but then she reached out, her fingers brushing his. He didn't move to pull her closer, just let the space stay gentle between them. Outside, the rain tapered into mist. Inside, the warmth between them settled like something that had taken root. September brought a gentler light, the kind that curled around the edges of things and made them glow. The days shortened, but not sharply, and the air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke as evening crept in earlier. By then, the children had made a rhythm of the place Kelsey with her chalk and letters, Kit shadowing Amos with a quiet ease that made the old soldier soften at the corners. Silas had begun measuring out the land near the pines. Not with stakes or chalk lines, but with his boots, pacing slowly, arms folded behind his back, sometimes pausing to kneel and press his fingers into the soil. Brielle found him there one morning, crouched beside a thick stone half buried in the earth. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge, and the grass still held a cool dampness. "You marking corners?" she asked. "I'm finding where it feels right," he said, standing. "So it doesn't fight us when we raise it." She stepped beside him, arms folded against the morning chill. "You always listen that close to the ground." He looked at her, sunlight catching in the lines near his eyes. Only since I had something worth building for. That evening, she brought the last of the beans in from the garden behind the barn. The vines had begun to yellow, and the tomatoes hung heavy and ripe. The cook fire crackled low, and a pot of stew simmered while Kelsey stirred it with exaggerated care. Kit sat a few feet away, carving squiggles into a scrap of wood with a blunt nail. "You're quiet tonight," Brielle said, crouching beside him. He looked up, serious-eyed. "Does Silas live here always?" She nodded. "He does." Kit went back to his carving. "Then I want to stay too." "You already are, sweetheart." He didn't answer, but he leaned into her side just enough to make her heart press tight. After the children had gone to sleep, she stepped outside to find Silas sitting on the porch rail, his hat in his lap, the night wind lifting strands of his hair. She joined him without a word, folding her hands in her lap. After a time, he said, "You planning to take their name?" She drew a slow breath. "No, I want them to keep it. It's the one thing they have left of where they came from." Silas nodded, gaze fixed on the dark line of the treetops. "You ever want to take mine?" She turned toward him, brow furrowed. "You mean that? I've meant it since the day I saw you carry both of them down from that wagon like your spine was steel." She didn't speak at first. The wind stirred again and the porch creaked beneath them. "I never thought I'd have a second chance," she said. "I've lost too much to believe in luck." "Not luck," he said quietly. "Choice." She looked at him and he looked back, and something settled between them, not sudden, not sharp, but steady. "I'd take your name," she said. "But not just for me." He stood, then reached out a hand. "Then come walk the land with me. We'll mark it together." They walked until the moon rose, until the stars stretched clean across the sky, until the trees fell away and the open space held only them. And come October, they wed beneath the cottonwoods, Kelsey clutching a bunch of wild sunflowers, Kit holding tight to Amos's hand. No preacher came. Instead, Silas spoke his vows plain and slow, with Brielle's hands in his, and she answered with quiet words that carried more weight than ceremony ever could. They built the house before snowfall, frame by frame, hewing the beams together with Amos and two of the ranch hands. Brielle painted the inside walls with whitewash, her hands raw but sure. Kelsey hung her drawings there. Kit kept a pile of stones by the hearth. When the last board was nailed and the fire lit in the stove, they moved in together, four of them, and a life they'd built not from ease, but from the ground up. Silas never spoke of the years before her again, and Brielle no longer dreamt of cold train stations or empty winters. In time, Kelsey learned to read full pages aloud, and Kit took to carving wooden animals with a steadier hand than anyone expected. And every night, after the children had been tucked beneath quilts stitched by Brielle's own hands, Silas would pull her close beneath the lamp's soft glow. "I was hollow before you," he whispered once, voice low against her neck. She kissed the corner of his mouth, her fingers brushing the place where his collar met his skin. "And I was lost, but not anymore." They never spoke of endings again. Only of seasons and fence lines and the way the air changed when snow was near. And through every storm they stayed together. Always.